I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Everybody, it's Ron from The Truth About Addiction. Welcome. Got an incredible mate of mine on here today. He's been a big part of my recovery and a big part of my life. And so I'll introduce you to Wayne. Wayne, how are you,
I'm
mate?
good, Ron. Good to see you, mate. As you said, a big part of both our lives.
Yeah, mate. Good thing. Mate, tell us the Wayne story, please, brother.
Yep, okay. Well, when I think about addiction, I go back to my childhood and where I grew up and how I grew up. And in some ways, you and I had similar upbringings, similar fathers. I know that what my father brought to our home was, for me, a lot of fear and a lot of monkey see, monkey do. And I was a very defiant child, and I wouldn't do as I was told. And I wasn't one that grew up understanding what consequences were. I didn't have the ability to have what you'd call consequential thinking. I didn't get that until later in life, and so I, even as a young child, I engaged in what you would regard as risky behaviour, and nothing outlandish, breaking street lights, getting into trouble with the police, and, breaking into builders' work sheds and stealing their tools, and, really petty stuff in the beginning. But still, in all, for someone my age then, this is before substances came into my life, what I regard as risky behaviour. And, and the risky behaviour, it kind of grew. And I guess like a lot of us, as you get older, you can reflect. I've had plenty of opportunities to reflect back on my younger life and see that, when we talk about addiction, it's not just about, for me and people I know, like yourself, substances. It's about behaviours. And I know, and I could see now how my behaviours become a creature of habit. And the people that I was attracted to, I wasn't attracted to the kids that were doing well at school. I was attracted to the kids that were up to no good and up to mischief and up to, and I guess without knowing it, a term that's come in, to my life later in life has been what they call FOMO, fear of missing out. I suffered with that badly. I just hated the idea of missing out what was going on, because I knew where my mates would be of an afternoon. And, my father, he didn't stay at home. He didn't live with us long, and he wasn't what you'd call a good, positive role model in my life. He was quite the opposite. And when he did stay home, he'd ground me and, wouldn't let me. So I'd slip out the bathroom window and, and go up and be with my mates. And, I just wanted to be a part. I had this, I guess, this desperation to be a part of and fit in, and I was always uneasy at home, and I had good reason to feel that way because of how he behaved and how he treated not just myself, but my mother and, to a lesser extent, my sister. But there was always a lot of fear brought into the house because of his violence and his alcoholism. And I didn't even know at the time really that he was an alcoholic. I just knew that he was a nasty person that was quite mean-spirited and, didn't show any love or consideration for us being his family. So, whether that or not impacted and I guess caused me to end up using the substances that I used or not, I'm not sure. It certainly didn't help. I certainly didn't feel safe, which is a sad thing when you think about it. I was a young lad. It's kind of embarrassing to say this, but that's the truth. There was a period where I was maybe 11 or 12 and, sometimes he wouldn't come home for weeks or longer. And, I'd be sitting in the family lounge room and, I'd see the lights of his car shine above the lounge room, the television in the lounge room on the wall. And, and the fear would hit me, and and I'd wet myself sometimes because I knew what was about to happen when he got in the house, and so that was there was just a lot of violence, and a lot of his mates when they would come around, and there was always hot gear at our place, and my old man grew up around Leichhardt, Balmain, hardly ever moved out of the area. All his mates were from around that area. So I was introduced to crime as a young lad, as old as 9, 10, 11, and that's how I grew up thinking, and that's how I that's how I behaved. I wasn't a good student at school. I found it hard at school. I was, as I said earlier, I was quite defiant. I wouldn't do as I was told. I was one of those kids that would sit in class rocking on the chair all the time, and the teacher would always have something to say, and I just wouldn't listen, and consequently always in trouble. Always pulled up the front of the class. As years progressed, always getting the cane like a lot of my mates did. And I remember my first day at high school, and I started smoking pot by this stage, and they said you had to wear a tie, and I just refused. I just wouldn't wear a tie, and I just didn't much care what that meant. I just wouldn't wear a tie, and and got into trouble. But anyway, I remember the first time I smoked any substances, pot, and I was with a group of mates, and they were always hung out with blokes that were a bit older than me, and they were smoking pot, and they said, "You've had a smoke before, haven't you?" And I said, "Of course I have," which I hadn't at that stage, but I just wanted to fit in, like I said earlier. I just wanted to be a part of. Anyway, when I just watched what they did, and by the time it got to me, I just copied what they did, and smoked the pot and got stoned, and didn't particularly like it, if I'm honest. The drug that I particularly liked when I started to use it first was heroin. Something changed in me when I used heroin. There's a term around addiction, and a community where I go, and they talk about a disease, and and it was broken down to a dis-ease, being at dis-ease with yourself, uneasy, however you want to frame it up, and and when I had heroin, I felt at ease. It was just like my whole body sunk in and just relaxed. And I've heard different people describe that they used because of how they felt, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd use that as a reason, but I do know once I started to use heroin, I couldn't stop. I thought about it all the time. And I just didn't like being sick. Fundamentally, I didn't. I didn't. I don't know of any heroin addict that liked hanging out. And I craved it all the time. I'd wake up thinking about it. I'd go to bed unless I had it. I'd be thinking about it. I'd be thinking about how I was getting the next quid to get it. It was a constant, and like many addictions, once it's in your head, it's like that. The thing with the mouse, it's there running around all the time. My life became dictated by the use of heroin, and really had no thought for what I would cause to get money to get heroin, and as I said, I knocked around with older blokes, and there was a couple in particular you and I spoke about yesterday, actually, and they'd been using a bit longer than me, and both been in a bit of strife, and Gary, dude young, had been into boys' homes, and we, as silly as it sounds, when people around the area I grew up, which was around Parramatta back then, they'd been to boys' home, you looked up to them a bit, and I was kind of drawn to that. I was drawn to, I'd rather be seen with them than seen with others, let's say, I mean, I used to regard others, when I use the word others, as squareheads, and the kind of ego and pride that I grew up with, you didn't want to be seen as a squarehead, I didn't want people to look and think of me as a squarehead, which again is a part of my addiction that I suffer with. And So I was attracted to, hanging out with these older guys, and they knew the go. And, and I started using the heroin at an early age. And in the beginning, because I seen what it did to them physically in terms of shooting up heroin. So I snorted it for the first probably 18 months, thinking I was a bit smarter than the average. But I had a huge habit. And when I did start hanging out, I thought my appendix was going to burst. I was fucking ill. And Gary, he said, you need to have a shot. So I had a shot. And once I had a shot, my whole life changed. And, I guess in life, for myself and for others, and you, Ron, that, I know you reasonably well, and I know your past a bit. And, I must say there's certain life-changing events that happen, and I'd see that part of my life as life-changing, a turning point in my life. And, the longer it went on, the heroin use, which introduced me into methadone programs, which put me in prison for a while. Whilst in prison, my addiction was just as bad as it was on the street. It was just a society within a society, as you know. I didn't even have a habit this particular night. I think you've heard this story before, but someone said to me, "Don't worry, we're getting on. We'll get stoned." And anyways, it didn't happen. The tennis ball came over the wall at Parramatta. And as it did, the governor and the deputy were walking up and landed right at their feet. You couldn't believe it. But the timing was, you couldn't believe it anyway. And so I started mentally hanging out, because I knew that I was going to have a shot, and it didn't happen. And as we got locked up that night, he said, "Don't worry, we'll still get stoned." And he produced a bag of nutmeg. And I thought he was having a go at me. But, and he said, take a couple of tablespoons of this and you'll get stoned. And that's all he had to say is, "You'll get stoned." And I took 8. I thought, if I'm going to take this, I'm going to make sure I get stoned. Anyway, it was shit. It gave me this light, trippy fucking feeling. But the whole point was, it was nutmeg. It wasn't heroin. It was nutmeg. My preferred drug over everything else was heroin. I loved it. I went to any lengths to get it. And however, I was, you used the word "get stoned," and as this mate of mine did, and I swallowed 8 tablespoons of nutmeg. And anyway, so, I was on a methadone program. I was on blockade methadone for a bit over 6 years. And I got on that, to be honest, not for the right reasons. I got on it because those few mates of mine, they were on it. And I was a bit of I guess, as a young bloke, I was a person that desperately needed a story. I think I didn't know it then, but I needed to fit in, and I wanted a story. And I didn't like sitting around, and while these other guys had a story about being in boys' home or being on methadone, and when I first got on methadone, I didn't actually really need to be on it. I went and got on it mostly because they were, and they had a counsellor. And anyway, again, as a consequence of getting on it, at that time, I got on blockade. I got on 120 mils for a bit over 6 years, 6.5 years, and that was horrendous. You just couldn't have told me what that was going to do and what that was going to cause to my physical life and my mental well-being. And anyway, again, you were talking about before we started this, some good ideas that we get. I had a good idea once that I'd just jump off it, and I went up to Kira up on the Gold Coast and detoxed off 120 mils of methadone and laid in a bed and dragged myself to a shower and sit on a plastic chair and let the shower run on me while I was bringing up the yellow vial for an hour or two, and then dragged myself back to bed. And and I did that for a few weeks. And then when I was fit enough, I committed a robbery in Burleigh Heads, flew back to Sydney, and within an hour I had a needle in my arm after going through all of what I'd just gone through. And hence how my substance abuse / addiction, my craving, how it impacted on me as a human being. And what happened was the longer my heroin use went, the more desperate I'd become. Because as a young bloke, there was something wrong. There was certainly something wrong. Whether it was my upbringing or lack of upbringing, or father, or the violence that I'd witnessed, the violence that was that was put on me from him. I'm not sure really what it caused, or if that caused it. But I loved playing football when I was young. I used to do a bit of boxing at the Police Boys. I liked sport activity. Still today, I love the football. I love Parramatta. I wasn't a bad footballer. I represented the state. I wasn't mean-spirited. But as time progressed in my addiction and my heroin use, I became mean-spirited. And when I say that, not just physically, physically, yes. Physically, I became violent in different ways. I didn't care much about getting a punch in the face. It didn't bother me. I'd been punched in the face a lot. Whether it was during football games or down the pub, or I worked on the door of a couple of nightclubs. I wasn't the best fighter in the world. I wasn't the worst. I got a punch in the face. I got a punch in the face. It didn't bother me. I got plenty of punches in the face from my old man when I was growing up. But I wasn't mean-spirited at that point. And then as my heroin use took over, and the longer and the more desperate, I become mean-spirited. And I would do things to get money, to get heroin, so that I wasn't sick. Really, that's all it was about. It wasn't about how I felt. I just, I hated hanging out, and hated the thought of not having it. And so that went on for quite a few years. And there was a mate of mine who you met, Ron, some years ago now, who passed away as a result of this disease with liver cancer from hepatitis C, named Doc. And I remember I was living at my sister's place out at Smithfield. I didn't really have anywhere to go, and she put me up. I was on the bones of my ass, really. I'd lost the ability to earn money. I'd lost confidence. I was 29, and I just wasn't the person I was. Anyway, I'd rang a place that I was familiar with through methadone called Wisteria House in the western suburbs. Wisteria House is in the grounds of a psych hospital. And anyway, I had to ring them every day for 4 or 5 days. Back then, when you wanted to get into a detox, you had to show them your fair income and ring them every day. And anyway, on the 4th or 5th day, they said, come in. And I remember it was a Thursday. And there's a couple of things about this story. Leading up to that, there was another guy who I won't name him, but he was meant to be getting on to a fair bit of heroin. And anyway, it dragged on for weeks, it seemed. It just didn't happen. So I ended up going into Wisteria. And on the way to Wisteria, I had to catch the train from Smithfield to change at Granville and then go to Westmead. And I bumped into Doc, and I was really sick. I was hanging out, and he said he was going to get on. Do you want to come? And the first time in my life, I said no. I said, I'm going to detox. I can't tell you why I said no, but I said no. And that'd be one of those turning points, because had I said yes, I may not be sitting here talking to you. Anyway, I said no, and I went on to Wisteria. And when I got there, they give you a form, and they ask you a lot of questions to tick boxes, and I think I ticked them all. So they had me, and after you were there for about, I think 10 days, it was a 3 or 4 week program, like detox/short-term program. After I was there a week or two, you could go home for the weekend. So I went home, went to my sister's place, and when I got there, she said, "Oh, Ted, blah blah rang." And said everything's okay. So I smoked cigarettes. Then I made a cup of coffee. I sat on her front porch. I thought, I'll go and see Ted. I'll get a few ounces. I'll lock myself up into some hotel room. I'll use it all. I have a rage and habit again. And this thought, these words come into my head, and then what? Which I'd never thought about before, consequential thinking as I understand it now. But I thought, and then what? So I didn't trust myself. I went back to the detox, back to Wisteria House. I didn't stay the weekend. So that again was for me what I'd look at as another turning point in my life, because had I have gone and seen him again, I may not be sitting here. And the following Friday, one of the counsellors there, he said, I want you to go to a long-term program. And I knew what he was talking about. And one of them you'd been to. And the other one was another long one, which I'd heard things about that didn't really sort of suit me. And anyway, that was on the Friday. And I said, well, look, let me think about it. And that Friday, they took me to a particular venue where there were people just like me that spoke in a way that I spoke, or spoke in a way that I'd lived, who I identified with. As crazy as this may sound, I think what happened for me that particular night is that I had a spiritual experience. Somebody spoke their truth, were quite humble in what they said and honest, and I identified with it. And I left that particular venue that night. That was back in July 1984. And I left that venue that night from someone that went into the detox feeling completely hopeless and beaten and desperate. I walked out of that venue that night feeling full of hope. And again, life-changing. And when I went back to Wisteria the next morning, that counsellor after breakfast came and seen me, and he said, what do you think? And I said, look, I think I found a long-term program. And he and his eyes, lit up a bit. He thought I was going to surrender to one of the places he wanted me to go to. And anyway, I told him where they took me last night. I think that's my long-term program. That long-term program is a 12-step based program where people just like me that acted and thought mostly, not all, not everyone acted and thought the way, I was attracted to people more like, that were a bit more like me. That's why I think that's how we got to meet in some ways. And so I said, I'll try that. And I said, I'll cut you a deal. If it doesn't work, I'll come back and you can send me to wherever you want. Anyway, fortunately, that has worked. And, next month will be 38 years of somebody that was hopelessly addicted to, heroin and alcohol, that couldn't say no, that smoked cigarettes every day, that had behaviours that were appalling. That, I can remember, being a 12 or 13-year-old, and, I was standing in my mother's kitchen, I was washing up for her. I looked out the window and I just had this overwhelming feeling of, I'm not going to be able to cut it in life. And what I meant by that is, like you see normal people go to work and pay their bills and raise a family and, just be consistent. I had this overwhelming feeling back then that I wouldn't be able to do that. And drugs and heroin use and crime and the people that I was attracted to, it helped. That helped me. It helped me a lot, actually. Gave me a crew. Gave me, as Di used to say, a tribe. And and so that that helped a lot. And but what's turned around and what changed as a result of that Friday night, I proved that to be wrong. With the, I guess, support and help and encouragement of people like yourself, and many others that you and I have both have history with, and people that we have in our lives, and we know each other. I've got people like you. I've always, we don't see each other a lot because where we live, and our lives have taken us in different directions. But I've always had a strong sense that I know, when the crunch comes, we've got each other's back, and that's how it's always It's always seemed for me, and knowing that you've got people in your life that have got your back no matter what, and that's what's helped, And today, going from a person that had to stay at his sister's place because he couldn't support himself, I was quite hopeless, really. I mean, if I had 500, I'd go on heroin. If I had 5,000, I'd go on heroin. If I made a lot of money and bought a Rolex, I'd hock it 2 days later to get heroin. That's who I was, I wasn't a high-flying gangster. I was just a heroin user that would commit crime so that I wasn't sick, and that I would feel the craving that I had, the substances that I used. And, and so over the last 38 years, wow, a lot's changed. I was advised not to seek relationship. I ignored that, as a lot of us do. I've got no regrets. I've made some poor decisions, in that 38 years, and sometimes you don't realise the poor decisions you make until you make them. You don't know they're poor decisions until you make them. Then you live, and life's about experiences for me. I'll not sit back these days and you asked me to do this. There was a part of me that felt a bit awkward, but I thought, you know what, he's my mate. I'll do it. I'll have the experience. I don't want to, I know I don't want to die wondering, but I want to live my life and have my experiences. And, and there's been loads and loads of wonderful experiences. You were there with me for the birth of my first daughter. What a fantastic experience, my first wife, who well, we stayed together 13, 14 years, had some great times, had some not so great times, and we're mates today, her and I are mates today. We've got, 2 wonderful daughters and 3 grandchildren, another grandchild on the way. And, none of that would have been possible. I wouldn't have met any of the people, certainly, out of all the people I used with, only one, Joe M, was ever somebody that I met that got clean, which is phenomenal, because I used in and around with a lot of people. To not only be afforded the opportunity to be abstinent, drug-free, which I think is important, for us. If you're a drug addict and you can be drug-free, be clean, that's one thing. For me, what I found out was equally important, which I believe was going to help me stay clean, was to live clean, to live a clean life. I was somebody that, I didn't work really much when I was using. I didn't see the value in it, and then when I stopped using, I stayed in the same workplace for 26 years. That's kind of unbelievable for me, to stay in the one consistent workplace, which was in the motor trade, and I became, pretty good at what I did for a long time. I got to meet a lot of people, got to have a lot of fun. At the back end of that career, I knew I couldn't do that, or didn't want to do that until I retired. So I went and studied more about addiction and people like myself. And in the beginning, I thought, I want to help troubled teenage kids. I want to help them, not need to go down the track I did. So I went and studied. I got qualifications. Today I work in drug and alcohol. I work with people that suffer with substance abuse, the same as we did. And for me, I've got to tell you, the highlight of my week is I run a particular group on a Friday, and watching these people that have been there for a few months change and, get the lights turned on in their eyes, the same as what happened for us, is wonderful. It's just wonderful. When I FaceTime my granddaughter and grandson, and, when I come down to have breakfast before I go to work, and there's a note from my daughter, telling me how special I am to her and how much she loves me and appreciates what I do for her. None of that would have happened if I didn't stop using. None of that wouldn't have happened if I didn't surrender to the fact that I was an addict and I suffered with an addiction, and it wasn't just about substances. It was about behaviours. It was about changing my attitude and changing my thinking. None of that would have happened. I got, for somebody that was so, when I was younger, discontent, always looking for something, whether it was sex, money, clothing, fast cars, I got to tell you, I'm 60. I'm quite a few quite a few years younger than you. Yeah.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
67 in a couple of weeks, and I've got to tell you, I'm very, very content. I don't, there was times when I was younger, in those teenage years, where I'd look at other guys, man, and I go, I want to be like that. I want to fight like him. I want to dress like that. I want to, and all these years later, I just want to be me. I'm okay with being me. I don't need to pretend to be anything or anyone else. I have my flaws. My qualities, my character traits, that have improved. I've been able to polish them up somewhat over the years. I try and be honest, live with my own integrity. None of that was in my radar when I was a young bloke growing up. And and I understand, and interesting, when my father did die, I went to the funeral and I did the eulogy. I don't know why I did the eulogy, to be honest. I didn't like him, but I had this strange sense that a part of me died. I'm not sure what that was about, because I can still sit here today and say I don't like him. I don't like how he treated me or other people. He wasn't a good person. He didn't teach me much of really how to fight, how to act in a bad way. I did, I picked up a lot of traits from him and around the way he treated women. When I think back on that, it's a bit disgusting, really. It's not, it's not who I am today, and it's not who I want to be. Ron, I don't know. There's much more I can say. I don't know if I've made a lot of sense, really, but I know that addiction was tearing my life apart, was killing me, and it was affecting, other people around me and people that cared about me. I had who I'm in touch with again because of social media. I had Gary, he had 9 brothers, and one of the older brothers, he used to say to me, "When are you going to stop using that poison?" Referring to heroin.
Yeah, I remember the old days, the poison.
And
the square would just say that.
and I'm in touch with him today, and he can't believe the change. Not just in the not using drugs or drinking or anything, just the change in attitude, and so I see myself as a fortunate human being. My family, they know exactly who I'll be every time I walk in the door. They know exactly how I'll behave, and there's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't tell them I love them. I never got that when I was young. Used to get a backhander or whatever. So I don't know if there's much more to say, Ronald, other than thanks for having me on.
No, mate, you're not out of here yet, buddy. I've got you for another 5 minutes. I just want to talk quickly about obsession and compulsion, because I think it's really important that a lot of readers, a lot of people that listen to this, that's how old I am, still think of reading computers. They don't understand obsession and compulsion. They don't understand that their brain is the issue, that what their brain's telling them is a lie. I can't get through the day without having a drug. I can't do this. And once they have the drug, they can no longer guarantee their behaviour, and the compulsion takes over. Like the obsession is just the lie. I call it a pedophile in my brain.
The denial, and also, like you and I both know, if the obsession as we understand it lived in our little finger, we'd cut it off. Well, it doesn't.
Exactly.
We know where it lives, and we can't cut that off. That obsessive, that obsessive behaviour. And I was again, I guess a bit like you, very impulsive. You know, my crimes weren't any well thought out Tom Cruise kind of Mission Impossible crimes. They were mostly, impulsive, and my head, even sometimes, not so bad now. I've got the tools to deal with it, but if I get dirty on someone, I get obsessed with what I want to do at times. And I know, and I think, what's wrong with you? What's causing this? And again, that word that I started off when we talked about was the fear. That the fear can cripple. If I'm not honest, I mean, I can bridge up and pretend, but it's fear. And it causes that, that obsessive behaviour, those obsessive thoughts that I have, that'll destroy me.
Yeah. I say to people, the most dangerous people are scared people. Because scared people do dangerous things, they really do, and that was my life.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I didn't even know what I was afraid of. I was just afraid. I was afraid of not having enough. I was afraid of not being enough, not doing enough, and all the stuff, and now, as you said before, it made me smile, and it makes me really happy. It makes my heart smile that today I just don't have to be anybody else. I can just be me. And I don't want anyone else. I don't want to be anyone else. I don't want to live in anyone else's house. I don't want to sleep with anyone else's girl. I don't want to drive anyone else's car. It's just called content. And I believe that comes from what we used to say a long time ago: a grateful addict won't use drugs. I really believe that in my whole heart, because I was around for 5 years relapsing, even though I had I had fair abstinence, in those 5 years, I was never grateful. Today I'm grateful. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for the smallest things, and the thing that I think that you and I have in common, and I really believe this was my part of recovery, is to break the cycle of our parents.
Yeah.
Mine was to break the cycle and be a good father. That's all I wanted to be. I didn't want my wife to be scared of me. I didn't want my children to be scared
Well,
of me.
I didn't know that at the time. That's what I wanted to be, but I knew what I didn't want to be, and I didn't want to be him.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure how that was going to happen. But again, we change our attitudes, and as a result of that, the obsessive thoughts, you and I know what to do with them. I know exactly, and I know that I don't have to act on every feeling. I don't have to act on every thought. I know how to decipher the difference between. I used to say things like, "Oh, you make me feel." Well, no, people don't make me feel. I choose to feel, however, and generally, it's not even a feeling I'm having; it's a thought. I need to be able to distinguish the difference between thinking and feeling, and what to do. Quite often now for me, what's most important is not so much what's happened or happening as what I do about it.
My reactions and unreactions to things are so
Absolutely.
important
today.
Yeah. The thing that got me into trouble most of the time was, as you said, I had a very short wick, and that was my fear. I'm fully aware today that my fear was the thing that made me react so quickly, because my fear of being beaten always made me be first. Even in relationships, it's not going that well, I'm just going to piss her off so she couldn't piss me off. I never had the, I don't know what you call it without being sarcastic, the misfortune of working for somebody. I've never had that. So, I did, I guess, when I was a little kid, I went for a job interview because I was arrested when I was about 15. I had to go, the lawyer said, you need to get a job. And I turned up at a iron foundry in a pair of handmade tan shoes with tailor-made pants and a fucking beautiful shirt. And the guy looked at me and he said, mate, are you fucking serious?
You address
what? He said, have you got your work clothes with you? I said, these are my work clothes. He said, mate, this is an iron foundry. He said, you better go home and get changed.
Why would you?
Back. I mean, because I just didn't know. I didn't know, mate. And you know what? I've grown up, around yourself and, in recovery, and it has been growing up, because today I'm responsible. It's so nice. It's so nice to be responsible, because with responsibility comes, like people say, it's a hard deal. I think it's a rewarding deal to be responsible, to know that you've earned it, to know that you're entitled to it, to know that you deserve it. You know, I say to people, you know, you're obligated to yourself to get clean. You owe it to yourself to have a good life.
And to keep
You
ourselves
know,
accountable for our own action and behaviour, regardless of what they are,
100%.
good, bad, indifferent. I'm responsible, and I need to
Yeah,
be accountable. I was never able to
and
be accountable. I'd blame you. I'd blame anyone. It was never.
yeah,
Well, a
you
few
did
times.
often. No, mate. You know, I love you dearly. I really appreciate you coming on the
Yeah,
Truth and
same, mate.
Addiction. This is a good thing. You know, we have to go on social media. We have to reach out to the young generation, the people that are going to follow our path, and let's hope that they follow the path of recovery, not the path
Yeah,
of
no,
destruction.
absolutely. Anyway, as
But
you
you
know,
know,
anything to help you or help whatever, we try and help other people.
yeah,
I'm
mate. But mate, it's been a pleasure talking to
You
you. It's
too, mate.
nice seeing you. You know, our family are one family. You know, as far as I'm concerned, they always have been. You know, and
Yeah,
you know, I think I'm blessed to have
yeah,
you in my
same,
life, my brother.
same.
I solemnly swear that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.